We'll be starting with instruction course on tumors of the conjunctiva. We'll be going through benign, malignant, and then the correct protocol to manage these tumors and ultimately histopathology. So I'll be taking care of benign tumors of the conjunctiva. So can anybody tell me, just looking at this picture, whether this is a benign or a conjunctival tumor? What do you think about it? It's a papilliform mass arising from infromedial fornix. What is it, a benign thing or a malignant thing? Just vague guess. What does it look like in one go? Doesn't mean that I am presenting on benign, so I'll show all benign. I can even show malignant also. So, okay. And what about this one? Okay. What about this one? What about this one? This one, the last one. It's not just simple hemorrhage. There is a lesion along with it which has bled. It's a small lesion, but it has caused a lot of hemorrhage. Okay. So we'll see all these lesions in the next few slides, and then we'll see how benign and malignant benign tumors can present. What can be the different variations in that? So first of all, I'll be talking about congenital conjunctival lesions. Most of these congenital lesions which present as the child is born are choristomas. Now what is choristoma? Choristoma is a hamartoma, which is nothing but an abnormal tissue present at a site where it is not supposed to be present. Common choristomas on the conjunctival surface can arise from the lacrimal gland, bone, cartilage, or skin. If it contains one type of tissue, then it's called as a simple choristoma, and if it contains more than one type of tissues, then it's called as a complex choristoma. So I think most of you must have seen something like this in your OPDs. This is just a limbal dermoid, and it can encroach onto the cornea sometimes. It is one of the most common congenital choristomas that is seen. Treatment involves simple shaving, or if it's deep, sometimes it requires lamellar keratoplasty as well. Dermolipoma is, I think, by far the commonest conjunctival choristoma that has been reported in many series. Conjunctival dermolipoma actually it can be seen as a mass, soft mass arising from the fornix, most commonly superior fornix. Sometimes it can be dumbbell shaped. It will have a superior as well as an inferior tail coming onto the epibulbar surface. If you look at the scan, it has got an extension or a tail going into the mid-orbit as well. This is another variant of dermolipoma, which is called as a pedunculated dermolipoma. In this case, the dermolipoma extends as a pedunculated mass, and sometimes it replaces the skin over the lateral canthus. This is another atypical variant where the dermolipoma was seen extending from both sides, medially as well as nasally, on the epibulbar surface, touching onto the cornea. Now, how you manage these cases is basically simple debulking. You don't try to remove this dermolipoma completely ever. It's just a cosmetic surgery. Patients do come for cosmetic rehabilitation, and what you do is just remove the anterior most part, and whatever bare scleral surface is left, you just cover it with AMG very properly, and you can glue it on with the Tissil glue. The results can be quite nice, although a long-standing scar may be still left behind. So these are some more atypical variants of dermolipoma, an inferior dermolipoma and a superior dermolipoma. This is a picture of a complex choristoma, which contains, as I mentioned earlier, it can contain more than one type of tissue elements. This was a poster that we had presented in OPI conference a few years back. When you see a complex choristoma, you need to rule out if it's associated with pigmentation on the face or on the trunk, upper limb, which is generally restricted to one side of the midline, and that is the situation where it's associated with organized nevus syndrome or nevus sebaceous of Jadison. These cases also have vertebral anomalies and some neurological features as well. Now, moving on to benign epithelial tumors. This is the picture that I showed you. This is actually a benign tumor, not a malignant one. This was a benign conjunctival papilloma of childhood. Now, there are some texts and some authors which classify conjunctival papillomas into papilloma of childhood and papilloma of adulthood, whereas the papilloma arising in childhood usually does not have any malignant potential. Those that present in adults like this, they are slightly different looking than the one that appears in childhood, in the sense that they are slightly more pinkish as compared to a very red mass seen in the childhood. But again, the basic thing is that it's a pedunculated kind of a mass. It may look like a mass which is spreading onto the epibulbar surface, but when you lift it up with a bud or an instrument, you will see that it's just attached to the underlying epibulbar surface with a small stalk. And that's where you can excise it. The etiology behind these papillomas is usually human papillomavirus. This is the next type of benign conjunctival tumor, that's actinic keratosis. This is also considered to be one of the pre-malignant conditions in the pathogenesis of OSSN or squamous cell carcinoma of the conjunctiva. This represents as a sort of a hypertrophy of conjunctival epithelium over sites of pre-existing pingicula or sometimes pterygium. It's more common where the sun exposure is more and dryness is more. Moving on to the melanocytic lesions of the conjunctiva. Nevus is the most common benign conjunctival melanocytic lesion that we see. It appears as a well-defined, sessile, flat, slightly elevated sometimes lesion on the bulbar conjunctiva, close to the limbus most often. Sometimes it can even have an extension onto the cornea, and sometimes it may have these feeder vessels which may alarm you to think that it's a malignant lesion, but then not always. Even benign nevi can have sort of a faint feeder vessel. So nothing to be scared by seeing a feeder vessel there. What you should look for is these microcysts under high magnification of slit lamp, and if you can find these microcysts associated in a pigmented flat nevus, then you know it's a benign thing. These generally have less than 1% risk of malignant transformation. Now these nevi can appear in various places and in different patterns. You see this one, you can appreciate the cysts better here, and in other cases you will have to look for these cysts under high magnification, and if you see these cysts, then you can be comfortable that you are in the safe zone, although you should look for nodulity and the other signs which sometimes nevi, when they transform into a melanoma. So I think the next presentation will be talking about that part. I will not go into the details of the malignancy transformation and how they look. Now this is another nevus only, but it doesn't look like a nevus. Now that India is becoming a hub for medical tourism, we are getting a lot of patients from abroad also in our country. And in our country and in dark skinned population, yes, this is the typical nevus that you see appears as a brownish mass. But when a patient comes from, a patient is fair skinned patient or a white patient, you may not always find that kind of pigmentation. So there melanin is missing, but the presence of a mass, a flat patch which has got microcysts in between, can give you a guidance that it's a amelanotic nevus. Racial melanosis is quite common in our scenario, and racial melanosis is usually bilaterally symmetrical, and it appears as flat, irregular kind of a pigmentation seen in dark-skinned individuals. Nothing to be alarmed by it. It's just a normal phenomena. Now, PAM is something which is very important. PAM appears as primary acquired melanosis. It appears later on. Like nevi, there will be a history that it's been present since childhood. But acquired melanosis is something which the patient will report that was never there, but it appeared later in adult life. And these appear as flat, irregularly defined patches which are non-elevated. Sometimes you will see that there is a waxing and waning of the size of the lesion. There are two variants, PAM with atypia and PAM without atypia. If you find that there is a PAM with atypia, then it has got a 46% risk of conversion to melanoma, and you need to be aware of that. There are certain specific indications for doing a biopsy. When you see a patient of PAM, you don't have to subject every patient to biopsy. These are the well-defined criteria. If the diameter is more than 5 millimeter, if there is documented progression, if there is thickness of the lesion or there is nodularity in the lesion, if there are feeder vessels, corneal involvement is seen, palpebral conjunctival involvement or association with dysplastic nevus syndrome, or there is a history of cutaneous or uveal melanoma, those are the cases where you should go in and remove these lesions. And management is wide excision wherever it is possible, and with associated with adjunct cryotherapy, and also do map biopsy, because many a times the normal looking conjunctiva in a case of PAM may also harbor some sort of atypia. And if the PAM that you've excised turns out to be a PAM with atypia, then you need to give the patient topical chemotherapy as an adjuvant therapy as well. Now, this may look similar to the lesions that we've seen earlier, but this is not a conjunctival pigmentation. Rather, it's episcleral pigmentation. So, this is subconjunctival pigmentation on the episcleral surface. This is a flat, it spreads like a geographic area, discoloration slightly bluish in color, and this is called as episcleral melanocytosis. It's a benign thing. It may be associated with oculodermal melanocytosis, where the skin is also involved, the eyelids are also involved, and in these cases where episcleral melanocytosis is associated with oculodermal melanocytosis, you need to look inside the fundus and you need to rule out uveal melanoma, because these cases may be associated with uveal melanoma. Moving quickly on to vascular tumors, pyogenic granuloma, this is neither pyogenic, neither it's a granuloma, it's a misnomer. Some people consider it as an exuberant granulation, and some others regard it as an acquired capillary hemangioma of the conjunctiva. It appears as a reddish, fleshy mass arising out of conjunctiva, and in this case, it was arising from a buccal. So many a times try to look for a focus of irritation wherever you see a pyogenic granuloma. Sometimes there may be a loose suture underneath because of prior surgery, there may be a history of trauma, and that could have caused this exuberant granulation to take place. And this was removed completely. This is another variant of pyogenic granuloma. These can bleed and alarm the patient and the doctor as to what it is, because they've got a very friable kind of a nature and they're very vascular, so they may be associated with a lot of bleeding. Sometimes you see these lymphatic dilatation, these cystic structures on the conjunctiva. This is nothing but lymphangiectasia, prominent lymphatics just under the conjunctiva. And sometimes you see reddish mass kind of a thing which is protruding out of the fornix. And you need to rule out lymphangioma in such cases. Get an MRI scan done, and that will tell you the nature of the lesion. What you see under the conjunctiva in a case of lymphangioma is usually an extension of the orbital lesion. There are typical signs on MRI scan which can define a lymphangioma. You will have cystic spaces, blood filled, and these cases can never be completely cured, but the lymphangioma can be debulked to some extent, although there is a risk of recurrent hemorrhage in these. Conjunctival varix is again an entity, but you'll have to look for it. Sometimes in patients, like in this patient, it's in present extreme periphery. It had caused subconjunctival hemorrhage. Patient had just reported this hemorrhage, but on lifting the lid and exploring, there was a varix. Again, this varix is not an independent entity. It's associated with deep orbital varices as well. Sometimes there can be conjunctival macrovessels or cavernous hemangiomas on the conjunctiva. These vessels sometimes can be benign and innocuous, but you need to look for an underlying melanoma after dilating the pupil and doing a proper fundus evaluation, as it could also represent a sentinel vessel over a uveal melanoma. Now, this is another photo that I showed earlier. We thought it was a malignant tumor, but again it's a form of a cavernous hemangioma occurring in a patient with Sturge-Weber syndrome. So this patient had extensive facial hemangiomatosis and hemangioma on the ocular surface as well. It was biopsied. I thought the nodule could be malignant, but then I biopsied it twice. It turned out to be a benign thing. Another milder form of the same thing, cavernous hemangioma, associated with facial hemangioma. Some of the less common tumors are fibromas, fibrous histiocytomas, neurofibromas on the ocular surface. This patient presented with a yellowish, firm, well-defined mass, soft mass on the epibulbar surface. On biopsy, it turned out to be a myxoma. I had excised it completely. Now, when you find a myxoma on an epibulbar surface, you need to rule out an underlying cardiac myxomas. Let's remember that cardiac myxomas were the most common tumors of the heart, if we remember, and this is called as a Carney complex, where people have multiple myxomas. It's not very common, but then I've seen myxoma rising on the conjunctiva and myxoma of the eyelid as well, which is not a very common thing. Some common caruncular lesions, squamous papilloma, which may arise from the caruncle, and some common sebaceous cysts. Caruncle is a unique zone because it's got sweat glands, it's got sebaceous glands, and it's got a conjunctival epithelium overlying. So all sorts of lesions can arise. This is a cavernous, it is a hemangioma, caruncular hemangioma. So many different variety of lesions can arise from caruncle. Now, there may be some lesions which simulate a conjunctival tumor. They are not exactly tumors themselves. Most commonly epithelial cysts. Many types of epithelial cysts can be seen in the OPDs. These are generally translucent, or sometimes they are filled with opaque epithelioid material. Sometimes you find a cyst kind of thing hanging out of the lacrimal gland in the supratemporal fornix. This is called as a dacreops, which is a retention cyst of the of the lacrimal gland, and this needs to be marsupialized. If the patient is concerned about it cosmetically or is scared of what it is, you can remove it, and this resolves very well. Many times patients come with a bilateral yellowish bulge on the lateral fornix and under the conjunctiva, but this is not to be scared of. This is usually fat. You can press it. It's a reducible thing, and it's a very soft, mobile kind of a thing. So, and the look is typically yellowish. This patient presented with a granuloma over the supratemporal part of the epibulbar surface, and it was causing some pain to the patient. That's why the patient came. On lifting, what I saw, there was something there. It's a granuloma. What it was, I didn't know, but until I opened it up and removed it, turned out to be sort of an implant. Now, some people use it as a presbyopic implant to correct presbyopia, and so in rare circumstances, you may find something like this lodged there. Patient then gave history that there was some surgery done he was not aware of to remove his glasses long time back, and this is what came out. Episcleritis or scleritis can mimic tumor in some cases. This again is a multifocal kind of a lesion which has got multiple subconjunctival masses. This was biopsied and it turned out to be tubercular in nature. Cysticercosis is very common in our country. Myocysticercosis is very common, and then you can have subconjunctival and anterior orbital cysticerci also. You can see the scolex and the cyst very clearly on the B scan. Another patient with cysticercosis along the caruncle on the medial part of the fornix, and this is again you see the CT scan. It's very clearly cysticercus. Sometimes there can be post-traumatic sequelae which may appear as a melanoma or a conjunctival tumor, but actually it's just a staphyloma. You do a B scan and then you will be able to know that it's not a melanoma, but it's just the outpouching of the or thinning of the sclera, which is which is causing the choroid to outpouch. Now, if anybody tells me that this patient presented with a blackish discoloration of the conjunctiva, I think if anybody can tell me what is this, I think it deserves a chocolate from the chief instructor. Huh? Sorry? Okay. This patient had undergone a vitrectomy surgery, and this was actually the choroidal pigment that had leached out of the vitrectomy port. And this was washed by the VR surgeon, and this is how it looked like immediately post cleaning. So I conclude my talk here. Thank you very much.